to my YouTube channel. It's by the grace of God, that's why we are alive. It's by His grace and His providence. Let's pray. Our Lord and King, we thank you. We adore your name for this day you've given unto us. It's by your grace, your providence. That's why we say that we are still alive. We've come today pleading with you that you come and teach us. Help us into knowing you, whom to know as life eternal. Come and teach us. In your name have I prayed with thanksgiving. Amen. Today is the fourth presentation of our series, The Search for God. The first week we looked at the concept of God, and we saw that God does exist. And then we look into a glimpse into the nature of God. That's what we did the second week. And we looked at some of the attributes of God. We saw that God is love. And last week, we looked at another interesting topic. That was the personality of God from an Old Testament perspective. And this week or today, we are continuing from this presentation. So this is a part 2 of what we studied last week. So we are still looking at the personality of God from an Old Testament perspective. What was made clear from our presentation last week was that we serve one God. But this one God that we do serve is composed of 3 distinct personalities who are closely united without a separate existence. So we looked at the idea of the Trinity from the Old Testament perspective. And one other aspect that was made clear from the presentation is that this God is one. But as I said, within this one God we serve is 3 persons, and that's what we studied last week using the temporality in oneness. That's what we looked at. And last week we considered critically Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 and 27. We looked at it critically. After looking at that, you can also consider Genesis chapter 3 verse 22. It portrays the same idea. And also Genesis chapter 11. Genesis 11, you read from 7 through to 9. It also gives the same idea of plurality within oneness. And also Isaiah chapter 6 verse 8. These gives that idea. But today we are looking at it from a different angle. I want us to consider the name of God in the Old Testament. Mostly we see the personal name of God in the Old Testament being Yahweh. Yahweh is in the singular form, and it mostly takes a singular verb. That's Yahweh. Aside Yahweh, other names of God in the Old Testament is one, Elohim. Elohim is in the plural form. If you read Genesis chapter 1, we mostly see God, and mostly that Hebrew word translated God is Elohim. And it's in the plural form. Interesting. And it takes mostly a singular verb, and at times a plural verb. And also we have Adonai. Adonai is mostly translated in the English Bible as Lord. Adonai also is in the plural form. Interesting. These 3 names of God are mostly used interchangeably in the Bible. So at times you see Yahweh, and at times you still within the same context you see Elohim, referring to that same one God that we do serve. And also you see Adonai. These all at times are used interchangeably in the Old Testament. Aside these 3 major names, another name comes in, and I want us to consider it. And that is the angel of Yahweh, or the angel of Elohim. That's the angel of God and the angel of Yahweh, or Lord. We see this name also coming in. And it's interesting to note that in the Old Testament, at times this angel of the Lord is equated to be God himself, or Yahweh, or Elohim himself. And in other instances, we see some distinction between the angel of Yahweh and Yahweh. But one thing which is so clear is that the angel of Yahweh is seen greatly to be God. And I want us to consider these things. Firstly, I want us to see an instance in the Old Testament whereby the angel of Yahweh is seen exactly as Yahweh, or God, or Elohim. Let's look at Exodus chapter 3. I'm reading from verse 2. And the angel of the Lord, that's the angel of Yahweh. If you are to use the Hebrew, it's angel of Yahweh. So the angel of the Lord appeared to him, that is Moses, in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside, he looked. It's interesting. He said, when the Lord, the word translated the Lord here was Yahweh. But first we saw the one who appeared to be the angel of Yahweh. That's him. So we see him being interchanged as Yahweh himself. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside, he looked. And then we see God Elohim being used here. God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. So it's interesting that the angel of the Lord is called Yahweh. At the same time, it's called Elohim. You see him to be equated, or we see this name being interchanged with Yahweh and Elohim. Interesting. Then he said, still the angel of the Lord who appeared, who is then seen as God himself, or Yahweh. It continues from verse 5. We see what will happen. Then he said, this angel of the Lord, do not draw near to this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. This is God speaking, but he was first referred to as the angel of Yahweh, or the angel of God. This showing this is God himself who appeared. And we see him again in this same verse referred to as Yahweh, referred to again as Elohim. Interesting. Let's jump to verse 14. This same angel of the Lord said, and God, now is referred to as Elohim, and God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said, I am the great I am. So the point I want us to consider here is another name given to God. That is the angel of God, or the angel of the Lord. And this same person is seen to be Yahweh himself. He is seen to be God. But there are also other instances in the Old Testament whereby there is a clear distinction between this angel of Yahweh and Yahweh, which comes to explain what I've been talking about. That's the plurality within the Godhead. Because he is one God, but it's composed of three distinct personalities. Let's consider this text, Genesis chapter 22. And let's see, it gives at times a distinction between God and the angel of the Lord. I want us to consider this text, Genesis chapter 22. I'm reading from verse 1. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, yeah, I am. The word translated God here is Elohim. So he said it came to pass, Elohim tested Abraham. And he said, Abraham, and he said, yeah, I am. And he said to Abraham, he should go and offer his only begotten son as a burnt offering. And we know the story, what happened. Abraham took a knife to slay his son. In effect, Abraham was ready to offer his son as a burnt offering. And let's look at what happened. Let's jump to verse 11. But the angel of the Lord, that's the angel of Yahweh, called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, yeah, I am. And he said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God. You see a clear distinction. The angel of the Lord we've seen in one text being equated, or this word being interchanged with Yahweh himself. We see a distinction here. He said, lay not your hand upon the lad. And he said, now I know that thou fearest God. He makes a distinction between himself and God again. You see this, and this distinction tells us that, look, the personalities within the God we serve. You see some clear distinction between these personalities. It's clear. Let's continue from there. And he said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that thou fearest God. That's a clear distinction. Thou fear God. Seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, from me. And he makes, you've not withheld him from me. This gives a distinction within the Godhead. So the angel of the Lord here is seen to be a bit different from God, the Elohim that we've been talking about. He is seen a bit different. And this is the distinction within the names I want us to consider, or that we are considering. Let's continue. So we know what happened. So Abram identified that the one who appeared was Yahweh himself. So you continue in verse 14. And Abram called the name of the place, the Lord will provide. Yahweh will provide, because he saw that it was God, as it is said this day. But we continue from verse 15. The angel of the Lord gives an account, and I want us to consider it also carefully. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abram a second time out of heaven. That same angel of the Lord appeared the second time. He came and he explained this to Abraham, and he said, by myself, verse 16, by myself I have sworn, says the Lord. And he makes another distinction. He said, by myself I have sworn, says the Lord. This is what God has said. And it's like the angel of the Lord is reporting what God has said. Because you have done this, and have not withheld your son, your only son, blessing, I will bless you. So here we see a bit of a distinction between the angel of Yahweh and Yahweh. But the angel of Yahweh, we've already seen that is God himself. He's God. He's 100% God. That makes it clear that there are persons within the one God that we serve, and that is what I want to prove. Let's consider one last test, and we will continue this lesson again. Let's look at Joshua chapter 5. Joshua chapter 5. In Joshua chapter 5, we see Joshua coming close to Jericho, and somebody appeared. Let's read from verse 13. And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with a sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversary? So he said, no, but the commander of the army of the Lord have come. We see another person appearing, and he said, I'm the commander of the army of the Lord. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped, and said unto him, what does my Lord say to his servant? Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take your sandals. Equal to what the angel of the Lord said to Moses, take off your sandals, for where you stand is holy. And Joshua did so. So we could see that the commander of the host of the Lord, he said, I'm the commander of the host of God. And he is seen as a divine person from this text. And you could see that this could be the angel of the Lord who appeared to Moses. He said to him, take off your shoe, because you are standing in front of a divine person. And note his name. He said he was the commander of the host of God. All that I'm saying is, we serve one God. But within the one God that we serve is three distinct persons who are equal without separate existence. And it's so clear in scripture. If God permits, we will still look at this aspect of the Trinity. We still consider the Trinity from the Old Testament perspective. It will be the last of the Old Testament, if God permits. Next week, we will look at other explicit texts in the Bible, whereby we get to know that, of course, there are three different persons who are different but equal, who make up this one God that we serve. Jesus himself said, in John chapter 17 verse 3, that this is life eternal, that they may know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom thou hast sent. To know God is life eternal. God bless you for making time with us today. Let's pray. Our Lord and King, we thank you for the message you've given unto us. We pray thee that you help us to know you and know you better. We thank you for answered prayer. In your name have I prayed with thanksgiving. Amen.